Fly fishing I started when I was 13 years old, and that was to do with my dad. My dad was a very keen fisherman, but mainly a bait fisherman, and he bought a whole heap of fly rods. In those days they were cane, and he died when I was about 14. So I was doing a lot of spinning back then with a floppy lure down at Glamaggy below the wall, fishing for the trout that would go over the wall. And I lost that after about 3 months, and really didn't have the money to go on with buying stuff, so I thought I'd better pick up these fly rods and give them a go.
I think I first got started in fly fishing probably, I don't know, in my early teens. I've always had a real love for fishing, and fly fishing was probably the last form of fishing that I came to, which is a bit surprising given I live pretty close to some pretty good trout fishing country. But as a really keen fisher, I grew up casting lures for natives and that type of thing, and moving into fly fishing just seemed like a very natural progression for me. Did take me a while to actually get the hang of it, I think. I had a fairly high commitment to lure fishing, so it was hard for me to put the old gear away and move over to the fly rod. So it took quite a while, but once I was there, very much enjoyed it.
Used to fish below Glamaggy Wall, which is in Victoria, and the fish used to come up out of the Gippsland Lakes to feed on smelt. And so I picked up the fly rod after I lost the floppy, and not knowing much about it, I had a cocky bonju on. So in the middle of winter there's not many beetles about, so it took about 6 months before I got my first fish on fly, and thereafter I got them regularly.
I was a little late getting into fly fishing. I probably didn't get into it until I was in my 20s, and I think I only did it because I was just looking for a bit more of a challenge. And I fished a lot with Brett, and Brett was pretty keen on fly fishing, so he got me into it. And then I had a fly rod and I took it up to a trip to the Northern Territory, and we were catching fish in the billabongs up there, and I just cracked out the fly rod and it was absolutely useless cast and caught about 3 or 4 barra, and then from there it was hooked because it was just the feeling of the fish on the line as you're stripping it in. So it's just a lot more hands-on, so I really got into it that way. And then I taught myself a bit how to cast, worked out that wasn't the best way to go, so I did a bit of reading. There wasn't a lot of visual stuff available, so I just spoke to people who knew what they were doing, and then just spent a lot of time on the water practicing and trying to get better. And I don't think you ever get the best. You're always learning new ways to cast in different circumstances. And so now it is definitely my preferred way of fishing. I still fish with bait and I still fish with lures, and I don't mind trolling, I don't mind doing anything, but if I get the chance to target a fish with fly, then it's definitely my preferred way to go.
The main reason I got into fly fishing initially, I was inspired by some videos I got from an American fly-fisherman called Gary Borger, particularly fishing upstream and across nymphing for rainbow trout. Pristine environment, just the whole aspect of it looked very inviting, and I thought, yeah, that's something I'd like to have a go at. And from there I just researched what's available in our waters and stumbled onto John Sawtell's book, Fishing for the Educated Trout. Well, that was very different to Gary Borger's techniques. Still just the aspect of being so one-on-one with a fish. It's a genuine hunt, the stalk, presentation, just the whole environment that you're in. I found that to be very exciting, very challenging, and that's one of the beauties of fly fishing. I do find it extremely challenging and immensely rewarding as well.
Got into other forms of fishing after trout. Chased Murray cod when I came to Canberra in the 1970s, 77. And Gordon Winter was a guy that used to catch them on lures back then, and that was even pretty well unheard of. You had to catch them on barty, grubs or bait. So I thought, oh well, flick a fly around, picked up a couple. I thought, well, that can be done. So I sort of branched to the golden perch, the silver perch, got a few macquaries, and hit the saltwater a fair bit. And I do a lot of that now. A lot of the fishing I do now is a lot of saltwater. I probably like that as much as the trout fishing. It's a lot more challenging in a sense that there's a lot more different species, different areas to fish. And they all seem to have all different habits, and every little estuary fishes differently, so it's a really good challenge.
It's definitely about the feel when that fish grabs the fly and everything's in your hands. There's no mechanics in between you and the fish. Definitely my preferred way.
Some of the first places that I did fly fish were local areas for me, so Pejar Dam out near Goulburn used to be a great trout fishery, and I spent a bit of time out there. I probably caught my first trout on fly out there, I think. And of course places like Lake Cucumbeam, where we are today, another very good trout fishery. So that's where I caught my first trout on fly and my first fish on fly.
I first tried fly fishing when I was a teenager, probably about 14 or 15. I was on a camping trip with some mates, and one of the guys had a fly rod. We were quite keen spin men then. We used to spin for trout with selters and that sort of thing. Anyway, one of my mates had this fly rod, so we thought we'd have a bit of a go with that. It was in Paddy's River, just outside Canberra. And I remember having a go at it. We didn't really know how to cast properly, but we had a fly on. And I remember casting it upstream and letting this fly line drift down. And I remember going to have another cast, and then I could see this little trout jumping around behind me. And then a light bulb went off. I'd realised I'd actually hooked a trout.
In terms of memorable catches, I've been very lucky. I've travelled a lot and been able to fly fish in lots of different places in the world, but two fish that really stand out for me are both trout. One of them was very close to where I live. It was a fishery that was renowned for big fish, but it was a hard fishery. It wasn't fish every trip, but I'd worked out a few things on how to catch them with lures. And I thought, if I'm ever going to get a 10-pound trout on fly, then this is going to be the place. So I went there trip after trip after trip, only with the fly rod. I wouldn't pack my spinning rod, so I was forced to fly fish, and I just relentlessly fished this spot. And then one morning, it was a cold winter's morning, crystal clear, sunny day, and I hooked and landed a fish that was a bit over 10 pound. Beautifully conditioned fish. In hindsight, the choice of fly was pretty ordinary, but the fish ate it, I caught it, and for me that was the moment when trout fishing and fly fishing just gelled for me.
When I branched out and started fishing the coast, there weren't many flies around those days, a few clouses and stuff like that, and when you go out and there's sandworms and there's prawns, and so I thought, well, I've got to start designing better flies. So that's been a really good part of the process, learning about the fish and then making patterns that do what you want them to do. And a lot of help with that was when I went fishing with Bushy a couple of times. He did his soft plastics, and I could see what he was doing with those, and I wanted to try to copy that with flies. So I had to design a whole new set of flies to do that. And it's been very much a learning curve, still is. That's what's good about fly fishing. It never stops, always evolving, and the more you know about it, the more you realise you don't know that much. So there's always somewhere to go.
My first attempt at fly fishing was at Googong Dam, and I was chasing some very fat rainbows, averaging perhaps 1 to 2 kilos, and using nymphs. And I clearly remember my first hit, my first take, and it was just electric. The way that line jolted and how it just telegraphed to me, and I just feel the fish so alive at the end of the rod. It was just an amazing experience, and I was more hooked than the fish. That was definitely the beginning.
I first seriously got into fly fishing in my early 20s. I was a really keen rock fisherman. I used to spend a lot of time down the New South Wales south coast with my good friend Phil Petrides. One day we were down on a ledge at Pretty Beach, and we met a guy there who was actually fly fishing off the rocks, and we'd never actually seen it before. We thought, what's this guy doing? Anyway, long story short, we got to know this guy. It was Dave Longan, and we got to know Dave from successive trips. We'd sort of bump into him, and then later on we actually, Phil and I actually took up fly fishing, and we sort of got to know Dave, and that's basically where it really started.
Yeah, we branched into saltwater fly. We decided to bite the bullet and become more adventurous, and beefed up our trout gear, and we headed north to Bathurst Island, a place called Barra Base. Full of enthusiasm and confidence with our 8 weights and our beefed up Ryobies. I think it was after 1 or 2 tarpon of no more than about 2 kilos that everything fell apart. spools were breaking down and the line was getting stripped. We just discovered quite quickly we were outgunned. But it was a learning curve. It was very exciting. It was a lot of fun, and some really good threadfin salmon as well, and some nice barra. It was a good trip, but we realised that we had to upgrade our gear from there, and it was a learning curve. But yeah, a lot of fun, absolutely.
As my level of experience sort of grew with fly fishing, and because I had a very broad love of fishing generally, I moved from fishing just for trout into fly fishing for flathead, for example, on the sand flats on the New South Wales south coast. I did a lot of game fishing too, so every now and then amongst the 50 and 80 pound tackle there'd be a fly rod tucked away, and I managed to catch a few striped tuna in between fishing for sharks and that sort of thing. I've been very fortunate to do some travel overseas as well for what are exotic species, I guess, so things like peacock bass in the Amazon, black bass in New Guinea. Fantastic fish to catch on fly, and I very much enjoyed those. Was fortunate to catch a couple of quite nice sized black bass in New Guinea on fly, one about 28 pounds and one about 32, and those fish are probably amongst my most memorable captures ever, and to catch them on fly was really, really special for me. Very direct form of fishing, very absolute, in your hands, got him on. Great fishing.
I do enjoy doing a fish. I used to enjoy it more when I was younger. I used to enjoy doing trips away to more remote places. We did a bonefish trip to Christmas Island, which was really, really nice. Done Darwin a few times, Cape York, camp out on the beaches, which was really good. And a bit more of a challenge for me because that's all I do is just fly fish. So I don't pick up spinning rods or bait or anything. So I do find it really good to be able to go to these other places and try to nut out the fish and how to catch them. And yeah, obviously fly fishing to me is just a way of life, has been since age 13. And I wouldn't know what to do if I stopped fishing and designing flies.
To me, the thing about fly fishing is it's just such a pure form of fishing. I know that might sound a bit strange, a bit wanky, but it really is. It's you've got a straight connection to the fish. You're going out there, you're trying to work out exactly what they're eating. You're trying to make something that will imitate what they're eating. You want them to eat that, and then you've got to somehow put it all together and catch a fish. And doing that, there's just something pretty amazing about it. I mean, other forms of fishing are great as well, but there's just something really special about fly fishing, and I think it's just something that people who do it, once they're hooked, they're pretty much hooked for life.
Probably two things about fly fishing that I really enjoy and that make it special for me. The first is it's such a very visual form of fishing. Depending on what you're doing, when you're fly fishing, you quite often can either see the fish or you're looking at what the fish are feeding on and trying to figure it out. It's a very visual way to fish. The other thing that I love about fly fishing is that very direct contact you get with the fish. At that moment, when the fish takes the fly, the line tightens in your hand and it's a very direct feeling, more so than any other type of fishing I've tried. There's an American author by the name of Jerry Dennis who often writes short stories about fly fishing and the outdoors. He has a short story called The Hand of the Earth. And in that, one of the characters, new to fly fishing, hooks quite a big fish and gets broken off, and describes it as the moment the fish took the bait as though the hand of the earth reached up and grabbed the fly, and that's how it feels to me. I just love that feeling of the fish taking the fly.